Hello, Interpersonal. We're going to go ahead and get started with Chapter 2 about culture and gender. Some of this stuff might be kind of familiar to you if we've already talked about it in class. If not, no worries. I'll give you guys the breakdown of it. So our agenda, understanding culture and communication, how culture affects communication, understanding gender and communication, and how gender affects communication. I might break this down into two, so culture and gender, but we'll just have to see what time we're at once we get done with culture. So first things first, culture is a system of learned and shared symbols, language, values, and norms. So it can't be a culture if it's not shared with other people and other people follow these rules and these norms. If it's just one person, it's not a culture. And these help distinguish people into groups. They help kind of separate people and say, oh, you're part of this culture, you're part of that culture. And there's subcultures within larger cultures as well. So if we think of the American culture as a whole, most of us speak English as a shared language. We learn how to behave. We learn how to give a handshake. We learn what a stop sign means as one of our shared symbols. Many Americans share values such as freedom and family and norms, so how we do things. But then there's also subgroups within the American culture, like the skater subgroup, or particular religious subgroups, or particular different culture subgroups within the American culture. And we have in-groups and out-groups. So in-groups are the people with whom we identify. So if I am a Caucasian female between the ages of 18 and 30, German American, then that is my in-group of how I identify. And anyone else that is outside of that group would be an out-group who is different from me. It can be cool and kind of exciting to be part of an out-group, which is why we have, subcultures pop up like skaters or punks. But it can also be stressful if we're being judged for being part of that culture. Different cultures have different symbols that represent ideas. So like American as apple pie. A flag can be a symbol. National anthem, Pledge of Allegiance, those are all cultural symbols. Even like the American white picket fence could be a cultural symbol of the United States. Cultures also have different languages, so there's more than 7,000 used in the world today. Some of the most commonly spoken are Chinese, Spanish, English. You also have French and Hindi and Punjabi. I'm trying to think of some of the more popular ones. And I guess Germany is a decent-sized country. Did I already say French? Portuguese? And if you think of colonial countries, then you can think of places where a lot of that languages are spoken, and then like Chinese, because they are the largest country in the world. Okay. They have different values, so that's what we use to judge if something is good or how aesthetic it is. American culture, we tend to value opportunities, equal opportunities. Everyone can earn this thing. Everyone can become successful. Material comfort, so tend to like to have nice things, kind of that keeping up with the Joneses mentality. Things that are efficient and practical, but also kind of that material comfort of things that are nice to have. Achievement, whether that be academic achievement or monetary achievement. Democracy, so everyone being able to have their share, or their say, free enterprise, an open economy, and individual choice, because we are a very individualistic rather than collectivist country. Obviously, like I said, these vary. So if we look at China, they are going to probably value collectivism or community choice more than individual choice. Maybe they value academic achievement over than just pure status achievement and how much money you make. Um, cultures also have norms. So these are the rules for expected behavior. So when you meet someone in the United States, the norm is to go up and shake their hand and not give like a super limp handshake. But in another country, the norm might be giving someone a kiss on the cheek or bowing or insert whatever here. And each subculture could have its own norms. So if you think about the different handshakes and stuff that people use in America, not everyone literally shakes their hand. They might have a handshake passcode thing that people do. You know, like you did in middle school and you'd make up different handshakes to do with your friends. But it's something to be very careful about because they can be very, very different across cultures. Same with like giving the thumbs up or crossing your fingers for good luck. In not every culture are those positive signs. So co-cultures are people who share values, customs, and norms that are related to mutual interests. So you can more easily change your co-culture rather than your, national culture. Because co-cultures might be like, if you're part of, the Gardeners Association, that might be an activity that you share, the community garden. Belief systems, so religious co-cultures. Or characteristics. Maybe you're a punk and that's part of your co-culture. And we tend to not just identify with one, we are multifaceted human beings. We're not just one thing. You're not just a student. You're not just part of that group. You might also be a parent. You might also identify as a particular religious group. You might identify as a particular non-religious group. You might identify as an activist, or someone who's very political, or a skater, or insert whatever co-culture here. And it's kind of cool because we live in a time where we have the internet and you can see how these co-cultures thrive online. Like if you go to Reddit, there's pretty much a subreddit for anything. If you want to talk about philosophy, there's a subreddit for philosophy. If you want to talk about specific philosophy and learn more about nihilism or stoicism or insert whatever here, there's subs for those that you can go on and discuss with people who have the same belief systems as you do. Or maybe you're really into hammocking or hockey. You can join those groups online and have a place where you can discuss, this interest that you share with other people. Social media, those can also kind of be their own co-cultures. Like, what was that? Was it like the Visco girls or something that was like an Instagram thing? I don't remember. I have a vague memory of someone bringing it up or seeing a picture of it or something, but I don't actually know anything about it. But they can make up their own co-cultures. So like Instagram and Twitter, hashtags, Facebook likes, but Facebook messaging versus Instagram DMs versus PMs versus, insert whatever here. You make a Pinterest board rather than, an archive or a collection. And they have their own norms and values. So Instagram is a lot of selfies and a lot of food. If you looked up the top hashtags on Instagram, that's what people normally post. Snapchat, once again, selfies, but they have different age groups too. So Facebook now is tending, I believe it's tending to be more older people, while Instagram is a lot of the younger crowd. I don't know who uses Twitter anymore. I'm sure some people do, but I don't, so I have no idea. I don't even know what people use Twitter for. But it's interesting to kind of see, the norms of that. Because like Twitter, you only have, I think, 140 characters to make your point. In Facebook, you can have these super long posts. Instagram, you only have a certain amount of space, but then you can go and put a whole bunch of comments. Snapchat, only a certain amount of space. And Pinterest is just mainly pictures and not a lot of text. So there's norms for doing things. You could post the same thing on all of these different social media platforms, but you'd have to do it in a different way each time because of the norms of the different social media platforms. And then how does our culture affect our communication? So there's two main types of cultures in regards to, I'm nix that. There's a lot of different types of cultures. We're going to start with talking about the two main types we can divide them into as either individualistic or collectivist. So individualistic cultures are cultures like the United States, where, as it says, we believe our responsibility is more to ourselves. We're more about personal achievement and saying, hey, give me the credit because I did this. Yeah, I may have had help from these other people, but this is my achievement, so I deserve the promotion, I deserve the raise, I deserve the credit. Versus collectivist cultures tend to be more community orientated and believe their responsibility is to the people around them, to their communities. So they tend to honestly work better in teams and do better at getting things done in teams. That's not to say, people in individualistic cultures can't work on teams or aren't good at it. It's just because of how people in collectivist cultures are raised to value the community and, cooperating, they tend to be really good at it. But someone who's in a collectivist culture, they might try to emphasize, we all worked together to achieve this this project or achieve this sale. So, we all deserve an amount of credit rather than, it was all so-and-so because, we all worked as a team. We also have high and low context cultures. So we might have mentioned this briefly at another point or in one of the other readings, but Americans tend to be very low context. You say what you mean and you mean what you say. So if you say, that you're going to go to the movies with so-and-so, then you show up to the movies. If you say that, yes, you want to do this thing, then, you do it. But high context cultures don't quite work that way. So they may say one thing but do something else because they're trying to convey their meaning through their behaviors, through the context of the interaction, rather than just saying, no, I don't want to go to the movies, or no, I don't want to do this. So an example of this would be, if you ask your low context culture or American friend, hey, do you want to go to the movie with me? They say, sure, and they show up. You ask one of your high context culture friends, so my friend Jackie, he's from China, then maybe I say, hey Jackie, do you want to go to the movie with me? He kind of has a look on his face, maybe he's shifting back and forth and he says, sure, and then he never shows up. So it's like, well, Jackie, I thought you said that you wanted to come to the movie. You said sure, but I should have known from his body language and the contextual cues that he did not really want to go and therefore was not going to show up. There's also power distance to keep in mind. Americans, once again, tend to be low power distance cultures. If we have a boss, a lot of the times, if we think they're doing something wrong or it could be done better, we feel like we have a right to, question that and say, hey, is there maybe a better way of doing this? Or can I ask you, why we're doing it this way rather than a different way? Because Americans tend to feel like no person should have excessive power. There's not as strict of a hierarchy, although there always is, a hierarchy. It's just not as strict as it is in high power distance cultures. Once again, an example of this might be China or Japan or the Koreas, where it's very high power distance. So certain groups have greater power. If you are older or if you have a higher up position, then people aren't going to question you as much. So, in a high power distance culture, a student is probably never going to question a teacher, even if, in their head they're thinking the teacher might be wrong, because the teacher has that power. So, your average student is not going to be questioning that because it'll be seen as very disrespectful. And in low power distance cultures like the US, students are free to speak up in class most of the time, well, at least in my class. free to speak up and ask questions and ask for clarification, or if they think if something doesn't make sense, then, you know, I will happily, you know, pull it up and we'll figure it out, you know, because, you know, humans aren't infallible. Just because someone has more education or, you know, is older doesn't mean they're always right 100% of the time. Okay. And then we also have more masculine and feminine cultures. This isn't to say that one is better than the other. It's just to say that some cultures tend to cherish, I guess that is probably the best word for it, or aim for more traditionally masculine values and have a stronger belief in sex differentiated roles. So Mexican culture would be much more of a masculine culture, because on average, they tend to value more masculine values and tend to have stricter gender roles in the household. Not to say that's in every household, just typically Mexican culture tends to be more masculine. And an example of a more feminine culture would be Finland, for example. So traditionally cherish more feminine values. So like helping out other people, social services, stuff like that, and tend to have more equality in regards to like household roles. We also have monochronic and polychronic cultures. So American culture is definitely more monochronic, as is like German culture, and a lot of the Northern and Western European cultures. So time is a very finite commodity. You know, once it's gone, you can't get it back. Very much sticking to a schedule and saying, if your meeting is at 10 o'clock, by golly, you are at that meeting on time, if not a little bit early. And then polychronic time is much more fluid, much more holistic. This tends to be more Latin cultures, and, you know, even like island cultures. So Hawaii, Samoa. I saw this a lot with my students from Paraguay when I taught at Pitt State. Because perpetually, no matter what you said, they were always like 10 minutes late to class, because that's just how their culture was. It was very polychronic. Nothing ever started on time because you took more time to build that relationship and build that rapport. You know, if it said the meeting started at 10 a.m., you know, people aren't showing up till 11 or noon, and then the meeting might not even get started until 1 or 2. So it tends to focus more on the relationships you can build rather than let's just go and get stuff done. We also have uncertainty avoiding and uncertainty accepting cultures. Once again, this is kind of like on a scale. There's all the cultures on here, I guess, for all the ones we've previously talked about, it's on a scale. So there's not really a culture that's super strictly, you know, a masculine culture or super strictly monochronic. They just tend towards one side or the other most times. So people in uncertainty avoiding, they want to avoid uncertainty. So they do things that are familiar and unlikely to take risks. So in these cultures, you see a lot of similarities. And what's the word I'm thinking of when people, I don't know, I'll think of the word when I don't need it anymore. But people who act a lot like each other. Uniformity. You see a lot more uniformity in cultures that are uncertainty avoiding. And you see a lot more diversity in people going out and trying to do things in uncertainty accepting cultures. So they're more open to these new novel situations and are more accepting of people and ideas that are different from their own. Hold on, give me a sec. I gotta pause because gotta go grab some Brussels sprouts out of the oven. Okay, Brussels sprouts are done and we are back. So the US in here, obviously we are a huge country. So I would say on average, we tend to fall kind of in the middle because we definitely have a good portion of the population who's very uncertainty avoiding. but we also have a lot of people who are very uncertainty accepting, because we have so many people who have immigrated here, who have come to start new lives and placed themselves in this new situation that might be extremely unfamiliar to them. And they have to, they have to adapt, and they have to be accepting of all of their neighbors now who might be very, very different from them. And then all these different societies, all these different cultures differ in their use of cultural communication codes. So, these could be idioms, jargon, gestures. I know we talked about how like the thumbs up and, fingers crossed for good luck. If you're flashing the peace sign, those don't all mean the same in all cultures. They're very culture specific, and I'll try to find a video that shows some of the different gestures and how they can have alternate meanings depending on where you are, or at least a graphic or something, so you guys can kind of like see, like it's not good in Vietnam to cross your fingers for good luck, because you're basically calling someone a not nice name. So you might say good luck and cross your fingers, and then someone might get very offended with you. Idioms don't translate well into other languages. So like raining cats and dogs, I think that's technically an idiom, because it's not literally raining cats and dogs. And if you say that to someone who's not a native English speaker, they might be very confused as to what you mean. It's like, no, I mean, it's raining really, really hard. And there's probably also region specific in the United States of idioms, because I think since I've lived here in Arizona, there's been a couple that I've just never heard before, and I'm like, that must be very Arizona specific. And then we also use jargon, which is more specific for co-cultures. You hear a lot of medical jargon, so its technical meaning is understood by the people within that co-culture. So within the medical field, people would understand the medical jargon. In the communication field, people understand communication jargon. If you're a punk, you understand, all the terms the punks use. If you're a skater, you understand the skater jargon. It's really interesting to see how this, how this varies within co-cultures. Okay, so we're at gender and communication, and I think we're already at like 22 minutes or so, something like that. And we are going to stop this, and this will be part 1, and we'll come to part 2 later. So thanks. Have a wonderful rest of your evening. If you have any questions, send me an email, and I will answer it, or just talk to me next time you see me. Ciao.